The topic, I think, today was billed as nothing as constant as change, which has been my mantra for 50 years. And I hope I can show you that whether I was seeking a job, building and growing a technology services business from DP, data processing, to IT, information technology, or succession planning, and now in my author mode, almost every aspect of my life has been driven by change. So to that point, let me first reminisce a bit about my graduation from Smith College, which is in Northampton, Massachusetts, and how I got my start in technology. I then plan to cover some of the key moments and anecdotes during my 50 years in business as, Elizabeth said, a woman entrepreneur and CEO. And lastly, I'll wrap up with some observations by my daughter, Elizabeth, who is running the company today and doing an absolutely awesome job. So we'll turn back the clock to 1958, and I was graduating from Smith, and I went to the college counselor and said, there has to be a job in this country that I do not now have to go to typing school. Because in those days, women were either teachers, nurses, or secretaries. And the only way you got that secretarial job was to go to secretarial school, and that was not, well, and the other half of my class was getting married. It was like, that's just what you did when you graduated from college. But I was hell-bent on working and getting a job someplace where I could make a difference. Well, IBM was actively recruiting women. They had violets on their brochures, which would be burned today if anybody tried to do something like that. They said if you had the analytical, logical ability that they would test for, they'd teach you everything you needed to know. And I had always loved math, even though that was not my major. Passed the test, and that summer of 1958, I was able to finally secure a job. We had 11 weeks of training, and that's 8 to 5 every day, homework every night, just like being in school. And the 10th week, 1 week, they told us about computers and said the average person wouldn't need to know more than that because there weren't going to be that many. IBM, 1958. Some fun things as well, and all of you young people in the audience, our generation way back then, the women wore white gloves to work. Some wore hats, I never did. Smokers, there were, and a lot more people smoked then. The men could smoke at their desks, but the ladies had to go to the ladies' room to smoke. We sang Ever Onward, IBM, out of the hymnal. If you can imagine that. And when we would go to evening events, and IBM would have dinners for all their employees and spouses, and as we would arrive at the dinners and we would be chatting before dinner, the men that we worked with, we few women worked with every day, would not speak to us when they were with their spouses. It was just very uncomfortable. They couldn't acknowledge that they knew us. So, it's a different world for you guys today in terms of these old-fashioned concepts. I was pregnant with our first daughter in 1966. And IBM, they thought you were so fragile you had to go home at 6 months and wait for 3 months because you were, I don't know, filing cabinet might hit you or something, who knows. Well, I loved my work. My husband was just out of law school. We needed me to work. The bank downtown wanted to hire me, but they had the same policy. So my husband, with his new law degree, incorporated me. The bank felt protected. They could hire a corporation, not a pregnant lady. And that's how I founded my business in 1966. we went to a charitable auction in 1983, and on the list of items that we were looking at as we were going to the auction, my husband and I, and there was an IBM computer, a PC. IBM had just come out with a PC late 1981 or early 1982. And I said to my husband, can you imagine having a computer in your home? Well, bless his heart, he raises his hand. We got the computer for $4,000, which is staggering. Today, you know, there might be 100. A friend who competed against my husband in the bidding said to me afterwards, what are you going to do with that PC? And I said, I'm going to revive my business. Oh, I was so excited. I was awake all night. I had to give notice. I happened to be at the bank again. And 3 weeks later, on a Monday morning, I was in my basement with a light bulb in the ceiling, the washer and dryer in the back, piece of plywood as my desk, and it was like, okay, now what do I do? I didn't have a business plan. I didn't have anything. So I was blessed to get started on the ground floor of the PC revolution. I mean, nobody thought that could be a business way back then. Back to the concept of change, we build a successful business by moving forward with the pace of technology, creating leading-edge solutions for our clients, and building long-term relationships. Every change in technology drove us to new heights with new and returning clients, which drove issues of learning how to do strategy and planning, which then helped us grow to the next level. It was really a very virtuous circle. Probably one of our biggest training opportunities, again, I mentioned Mankato, is for the year 2000, they needed to convert CC Mail to Outlook. CC Mail was not Y2K compliant. And we trained 35,000 people worldwide in a span of 3 months, traveled to 23 countries, teaching 6 classes a day, somewhere in the world, around the clock, to complete the training by the turn of the century. Clearly a pinnacle for our instructor-led training. And then about a year later, 9/11 just created a sea change. No one was going to put their employees on a plane or put trainers on a plane to go do that kind of instructor-led training worldwide. So that led to our training, computer-based training, which initially was with CDs and that type of thing, and then to internet, web-based training, e-learning, and all of that was with graphics and multimedia and interactive on the computer, but did not need an instructor. People could take it at their own time and in their own convenience, take their training worldwide. And now M-learning, mobile learning, and my daughter has pioneered that, and that is basically taking training on your smartphones. And it's just awesome. And as she explains it, it's just not dumbing down the training into smaller bites. It's actually a whole new concept of delivering training in nuggets through emails, voicemails, text messages. And there was an Ebbinghaus, I guess, 200 years ago, who said that if you get that chunk down learning over a longer period of time, it enhances the retention remarkably. So then as we continued to grow, one of our advisory board members, Ken at Mankato, said, you know, we're getting some PCs here. Do you think you have somebody who could unbox them and install them on the desks? And we thought, well, yeah, I guess we could do that. Our teachers could provide over-the-shoulder support, which you just did. You went around to people's desks and helped them. So that was the beginning of our technology management services. Today, of course, not surprisingly, it's all done remotely. And the beauty of that, of the technology management practice that we have, is that if a human being has to go to the client's office, say to replace a hard drive, it requires a real human being. It can't be outsourced to India. In terms of sort of the 20/20 hindsight as I wrote the book and lessons learned, I developed what I would say are 7 success criteria. Timeless concepts, but in no particular order. Passion. If you're passionate about what you do, nothing stands in your way of success. You don't have obstacles. You just have opportunities to develop. Perseverance. There was a 4-star general at Scott Air Force Base across the river from us, and we have been trying to get into the government, and I had an opportunity to meet him as a wonderful human being. And I said, General Handy, how can we get business in the government? And he said, if it's important to you, persevere. We did, and it worked. Customer sat, as I call it, as the third one. That was IBM's expression for customer satisfaction. And you just had to exceed your client's expectations, drive long-term relationships that way. Now, the other expression IBM used was smother. You got to smother them with attention and make it right. And of course, that was fairly easy to do because in those days we came for free under the lease of the big mainframes. So they didn't have to watch how many hours you were working and whether they paid for the detail hours. It was just, IBM says, get in there and make it right. Integrity, impeccable integrity is a given, and without it, you have nothing. People build relationships, satisfy our clients, communicate the culture, carry it into the future. People buy from people. Focus drives expertise, business growth, success. And I used to always say when we got sort of aggressive and decided we were being successful, we could do almost anything we wanted to do, and we got out there on the fringes, pardon me, but we'd screw up. So we really learned what our focus was in the PC realm. And lastly, change. Nothing is constant as change. Fast forward to today. My daughter Elizabeth, as I said, is doing an extraordinary job, and she, in the postscript, just a couple of the items, skin in the game, she recognized that we lost that as we brought in more employees, and so she has reestablished the practice of having the people who deliver our services ensure that the clients are satisfied because part of their pay is based on performance and satisfied clients. So skin in the game is critical. Giving, in regard to an old adage, in giving one receives, I had never thought to apply, that's a charitable concept, but I'd never thought to apply that to business. I was blessed to be on not-for-profit boards and then on 2 public boards in St. Louis. And what that did was, through networking, bring us more business. And it had never occurred to me to translate it that way. One thing toward the end of the book that I picked up on, and Elizabeth and I both call it 110%, and it says, if you're going to do 95-yard dash, forget it. You have wasted 95 yards. You've got to go 110% or don't bother.